Hello there, this is David Parker, Director of Human and Robotic Exploration at European Space Agency. Thank you so much for joining us today for this special live Q&A session with Samantha Cristoforetti. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm great. So where are you today anyway?
I'm in Cologne at the European Astronaut Center. Actually, a little break home. I got back about a week ago from a training trip to Houston, and I'm in a week time. I will be heading to Star City in Russia to continue training there.
Fantastic. So this is for your mission next year in 2022. So we're going to spend, I think, about half an hour together, and we're going to try and answer some questions, some from me, and some questions also from social media that have been posted over the past day or so. But to start with, we have kind of a special announcement because you've just been announced that you will be, during your mission next year, for some of the time, commander for Expedition 68. So this is, I think, Europe's first female commander role. So how do you feel about this new appointment?
Well, I'm honored, of course, and humbled, and of course, I also feel the responsibility of having this leadership role on orbit for part of an expedition. As it always happens when you arrive to space station, there's a crew there with an experienced crew who will be leading for the first part of the expedition, and then at some point, after a few months, those folks will leave us on board as, let's say, the experienced veteran part of the crew. And of course, we will welcome newcomers. And at that point, I will take over as the commander of the space station. And so I will have the overall responsibility for the crew up there. Of course, we all know the flight director is really the person on the ground responsible for all the operations and the safety of the space station. But when it comes to making sure that we as crew members up there are taking care physically of that wonderful human outpost out there in space, when it comes to making sure that we perform as well as possible as a team and everybody's doing well and we communicate well with the ground, then the ultimate responsibility then lies with the commander. And so, of course, I also feel very much that responsibility.
So does it feel like a daunting responsibility, or is it something you're really looking forward to?
Well, both, I would say. I mean, it's certainly daunting in the sense that, I understand that I certainly respond ultimately for the good performance of our crew. Although, I think people understand that we are talking about a highly capable group of people, right? We are all trained at the same level. We're all equally competent. So it's really about having a coordination role, making sure that the communication among ourselves is always smooth and the communication between us and the ground is always smooth. And then where there is any issue or any problem, we sort that out as soon as possible so that we can perform as good as possible as a crew and get the mission accomplished. So of course, it's not a matter of like giving orders or anything like that, but it's really just a matter of being a facilitator.
Yeah, but I guess in an emergency, they might all look to you. So how do you think you're going to prepare yourself mentally for this step?
As for everything, you prepare in training, and that's indeed a responsibility of the commander already on the ground. Emergency training is a big part of what we do to prepare for a mission to space. A lot of the training we do on the ground is stuff that we hope we never need to actually implement on orbit, right? We spend time in the simulators preparing for a fire scenario or a depressurization scenario where you're leaking air into outer space and the pressure inside the capsule is dropping, or an ammonia leak, which is like a toxic substance that might leak into the cabin. So we spend a lot of time training for scenarios like that we hope, of course, that they will actually never happen in reality. But if they do happen, those are the situations in which you really have to function, very, very well, very, very quickly as a crew, as a team. And to do that, you have to prepare very well on the ground, to have roles and responsibilities clear to everybody. You have to figure out how to communicate with each other in a very effective way. So that's certainly part of the training, and certainly something that, as the commander, you're expected to help with and facilitate.
Well, that's one of the things I've heard, that a key thing for a successful astronaut is, yeah, sometimes you have to be a leader and sometimes you have to be a follower. Is that true, do you think?
Very much so, and those are definitely two sides of the same coins. In my experience, good followers are also good leaders, and good leaders are also good followers. So a leader will always understand in a situation, well, actually, I am not the most competent person right now on this one thing, so I should take a step back and let this other person lead, because right now he or she is the best person to lead, which doesn't mean that you abdicate your leadership role. At the end, you remain accountable, you remain responsible, but you understand that in this specific moment, this other person actually knows more than I do.
Yeah, I guess that's a real skill. So by the time you fly, it'll be nearly 7 years since your first mission. So what's changed in the world of space exploration? And I guess you'll go to space in a different way than last time. So tell us about that.
Yeah, quite a bit has changed. The first time I went 7 years ago, I flew on a Soyuz, on a Russian space vehicle, a very, a vehicle that has been flying for decades, with a long heritage, long history. I was the flight engineer on that vehicle. I did a lot of training on the Soyuz. I had a very in-depth understanding and knowledge of the systems. I was able to fly it manually if needed in some phases of the flight. And I flew, of course, out of Kazakhstan, out of the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Now, fast forward 7 years to now, and I'm actually getting ready to fly to space on a quite new vehicle. Has only flown a few times with crew on board, which is the SpaceX Crew Dragon vehicle. So something completely new. Requires a lot less training, is a lot more automatic. So I will not be spending as much time as I did back then on the Soyuz training for Dragon. And I will fly, of course, out of Florida. It will carry 4 people instead of 3, which means that the standard complement of crew on space station has increased from 6 to 7, which means that we're one more person on board and a lot of more crew time to get a lot of things accomplished.
So that extra crew time is maybe telling us something about what you will be doing on your mission. So what do you expect to be doing on your mission, and how much of that is science?
Uh, a lot of it, of course, will be science. I mean, we all know the International Space Station is mainly a laboratory. It's a interdisciplinary laboratory to do research in all kinds of disciplines where microgravity, which is just a fancy word for weightlessness, is interesting, is relevant, plays a role. And so all kinds of scientists, from physicists, chemists, material scientists, but also people working in life science, they might come up with interesting scientific questions where being able to switch off the effect of gravity is interesting to be able to answer those questions. And so those people, smart people, way smarter than me for sure, come up with interesting experiments, and then they submit it, for example, to ESA, or in my case also to the Italian Space Agency possibly, and we help them then to implement them on board of the space station. And when you show up as an astronaut, then you get all that scientific program that you didn't develop yourself, but you're going to be able to help making it happen by actually physically carrying it out on orbit. And that's very gratifying. I mean, every little thing that you do on orbit, even if it's like a 20-minute activity to install a little experiment and to switch it on, it's in a way extremely gratifying, because you know that you're putting the cherry on the cake on many, many years of work that people have done on the ground to prepare that experiment. And then finally you're there and you're helping making it happen.
Great. I mean, that's one of the questions on Twitter, and it was from Pavel Varushka, is which experiments or other activities maybe on the ISS that you're especially looking forward to on your second mission?
Yeah, it's a little bit early for me to know in depth or in detail the this scientific complement, the actual experiment. But there are certainly a few new facilities in Columbus, particularly, which is a little piece of Europe and the International Space Station, or ESA laboratory. It's going to get a bit of a midlife upgrade to get it ready to do more exciting science in the years to come. And so it's always nice when you're there to actually do an upgrade of your home. We will get a new science rack, which is the European Dry Rack Mark II. And probably during my stay on board, I will also be able to install inside of this EDR, this European Dry Rack Mark II, the first metal 3D printer for microgravity. So that's really something I'm quite excited about.
Oh, that sounds interesting. So that's a step towards kind of producing devices and equipment actually in space, and maybe one day from space resources, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah, and as you know, that's definitely an enabling technology when it comes to have exploration, deep space exploration beyond, especially beyond low Earth orbit, which is economically sustainable. Which, by the way, brings me maybe to a question to you, Dave, because I've been talking here quite a bit. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about what's coming in the future in terms of human space exploration and robotic space exploration.
Well, yeah, yes, it's a good question. There's a lot going on, of course, at the moment. I'm proudly wearing the T-shirt of Thomas Pesquet's mission Alpha. So he was launched at the end of April. So he was the first of our ESA astronauts to be launched on a US commercial vehicle. So his mission's well underway now and going extremely well. And he's going to prepare for some upgrades of the space station, some of the new equipment we've already uploaded, like a new sort of high-speed data link that allow us to get a lot more data down from our Columbus laboratory. And that will prepare also for the launching of our European robotic arm, which is going to go up with our Russian friends in July. And then one of your colleagues, Matthias Maurer, is going to make his first mission to space, I guess in the autumn, sorry, the fall, if he's going launching from America. And then towards the end of this year, we're really looking forward to an incredible step forward, which will be the first launch of Artemis, the first Artemis mission with our Orion new deep space crew vehicle. And then, of course, we built the European service module, the power and propulsion for that. So that's preparing us for this return to the moon and preparation for sustainable moon exploration. So all these things are exciting. And both the current generation and maybe the next current generation of astronauts are going to be part of that exploration of the moon.
Speaking of which, we've have our astronaut selection ongoing. Initially, the deadline to submit applications was last week, but I understand it's been extended by a few weeks. Do you want to tell us why?
Yes, well, so what's very exciting news that we have a new associate member of ESA. Lithuania has joined literally last week. And since both member states of ESA, people from those countries can apply to the astronaut call, but also from the associated member states. And so we've decided to extend the call for a few more weeks to give a chance. And also, in the current situation, there are some medical certification that's needed and maybe a bit difficult to get that for some people who are applying. So it's a last chance. And if you've been thinking about whether to apply, we're giving you a little bit more time to go for it. So now's the time. So another couple of weeks, and then the opportunity will be gone.
Yeah. Hopefully, if there's still some people out there who've been on the fence and didn't quite get around to submit their application, now that they have some more time, they will do so.
Well, you have a nice little way of putting it, isn't it? That, well, how do you increase your chances of becoming an astronaut? How do you answer that?
Well, you have to apply, and then that's your that's the one thing that is going to increase your chances by the most.
So actually, it's one of some questions related to the astronaut selection have come in online. So here's a great one on Instagram, which is, what can I do to make my resume stand out from all the other aspiring astronauts? What are we looking for astronauts?
So I would say we are looking for well-rounded people who bring a diverse set of experience, but also well-developed personality. And so anything that you can put in your CV that really shows that what you have done that is a little bit maybe beyond your studies, beyond the achievement in your core profession, which is important as well, of course, please indicate those as well. But anything that you've done that maybe was challenging for you in terms of managing stress or multitask or be a good team player or taking care of a team, taking responsibility for the well-being of others. That is something that is incredibly important when you are on the International Space Station, or really in any other, I think, challenging environment with a crew, with a team. And so anything in your professional life, but also in your private life, in your family life, in your free time that you've done, that you think, okay, in that situation, I think I learned this, I gained this kind of experience. Maybe I did it completely wrong. I didn't actually show, the good behaviors, but I learned so much from it that I know next time I will be able to show the right behaviors. Anything like that you can put in your CV, I think will be valuable.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, is there anything in your past life or even during activities you've been doing over the past few years that you think, has helped you prepare for not only becoming an astronaut, but now this next step of being a commander of the space station?
Yeah, certainly. Well, being on space station, not as a commander the first time, it certainly stands out. As you mentioned earlier, the first step to becoming a good leader is being a good follower. But then I guess a couple of years ago, I had an experience to actually serve as a commander in what we call an analog mission. So we spent, it's called NEMO. It was the NEMO 23 mission. It's organized by NASA in a very unique environment. It's like an underwater habitat. So you actually go to the ocean floor off the coast of Florida and you live there. We spent about 10 days down there, and it's very small. It's a lot more cramped than the actual space station, and it's a crew of 6. But of course, it's a shorter mission. It's only 10 days and not 6 months. And although you may think that you're not as isolated and remote as on space station, because the surface is about 20 meters from where you are, you can't actually swim to the surface because once you've been out there for a certain number of hours, you're in so-called saturation. So if you were to swim to the surface, which you absolutely should not do, you would be your life would be in danger. You would have a very serious decompression sickness. So although you're not so far away from the normal world, from the surface, you're actually about 18 hours of slow decompression away from the surface. So in a way, it's very isolated. In some ways, it's even more isolated than being in space. And then you're down there and you walk out onto the ocean floor with those professional diving helmets that professional divers use. For example, those who work on underwater, the pylons of bridges underwater or other underwater infrastructure. And you have an air supply through umbilicals, through hoses. That connect you to the habitat, and then you're basically able to go out and explore the ocean floors for hours. And it's like simulating a spacewalk, for example, on the moon. And it's set up like a real space mission. Like, you have your crew, you've got your commander, you've got your crewmates, you have your HAP technicians, you have a simulated space-to-ground radio, which is really a communication with the surface. And on the surface, you have a simulated mission control, and the whole day is organized as though you were on the International Space Station.
That does sound fascinating. Do you think we can use those kind of analogs to prepare for lunar missions and even missions to Mars one day? Is that a good idea? Is that something we should be doing more of?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so I guess the focus of our mission was lunar surface exploration. So when we went out on those spacewalks, we tested tools that might be used on the moon for collection of geological sampling. In fact, we had such a toolkit developed here at the European Astronaut Center. We also had a setup, was called LISA, to enable a rescue of an incapacitated crew member on the surface of the moon during an extravehicular activity. This is something I wasn't really planned for during the Apollo missions, right? If somebody had become completely incapacitated. There was really no plan of how the other crew member would be able to rescue this person and bring them back into the lander. And so this is something that this time we would prefer to have a plan for. And so this is something that we tested back then. But you can also, pretend that you are on Mars, of course, and then you would have a different delay in communication, which is something that has been done in previous NEMO missions.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, on social media, we're talking about the isolation of being on the NEMO mission and obviously on the station, and we had quite a few questions about, if you like, mental health or psychological support. So, for example, what kind of psychological support do you have on the space station? And do you feel alone in space? And how do you, from a mental health point of view, how do you manage the experience? I think a lot of people are especially interested in this because we've all, through COVID, been through strange experiences of isolation, and maybe you have something to teach us.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I have anything to teach, but I don't think that on space station I have ever felt isolated. And the reason is quite simple, is that, we are together with a crew, it's always the 6 of you, but also, or the 7 in the future, but also because you're very much integrated in the work on the ground. So although it's only the 7 of us on board of the space station, we are in constant space-to-ground contact, and most of the activities that we do in close collaboration with the ground. So you always feel like you're very, very much connected. What I think was more relevant for the experience that many of us have had during COVID is the fact that, especially early in the very harsh lockdowns, when we all had to stay home, we couldn't go out, and we really had to share that confined space of our home with our families 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And although we all love our families, just as we like our crew members, over time there can be little conflicts that arise. And in that sense, I think the experience was somewhat similar. And I think what helps, as in many things, is open communication, open feedback, and a lot of sense of humor to really diffuse with a laugh any tension that is just starting to arise.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And obviously, thinking about the people applying to be astronauts right now, there are a lot of not obvious challenges about being an astronaut. I guess, as again, somebody on Twitter, Laura Zola, is asking, being an astronaut, moving abroad, being away for extended periods. So do these things take a toll on family life? And can you talk at all about how it was for you and how you deal with the work-life balance of being an astronaut, especially as you're preparing for the new mission?
Yes, absolutely. So when I went on my first mission, I did not have children. So in that sense, I think it was certainly easier. There was something significant that was at that time not part of my life, and so I didn't have to worry about that. Now I do. I have 2 children, and so that's certainly something that, in this case, I have to think, consider, and worry about. And what I will say is that, every astronaut, we can do this incredible job because we have the full support of our incredible families. And so I can do this because I know that my children are well taken care of and are in good hands. But that's, of course, does mean that my partner and my family have to do some sacrifices to allow me to fulfill this this dream of mine and to continue to do this this job. And so I'm incredibly grateful, as I know every single crew member who ever went to space station, their first thought is gratefulness towards their family and their continuing support. I will also say, though, that the astronaut job is peculiar in the sense that it has peak and valleys. I mean, there's when you're assigned to a mission, when you're training for a mission, you're performing your mission, and the immediate time after the mission. Those are the peaks when your job really demands your full commitment. And with that, the full commitment also and the support of your family. But then, different from other jobs, I don't think that as an astronaut, you're always running. You're not always in a marathon. You're not always competing with others. There's also quiet times, after the dust has settled after one mission and before you start training for the next. you have a lot of control and you can really pace yourself. And so maybe this can be a little bit encouraging to the people who think it might be too much for their family.
Yeah, and so what other things have you been doing since your first mission? Maybe writing a book, but what about the technical things as well?
Yes, so for a couple of years, I took a leadership role here at the European Astronaut Center in what we call Spaceship EAC, which is a really cool initiative. It's made of young people. So we have a couple of postdocs and a few young graduates, brilliant young professionals from all over Europe that come in through a highly selective program for a year or two after their degree. But then most of the team is really made of students, like master students who come again from all over Europe to us to write their final thesis, typically for 6 months, some of them even for 12, 13 months. And the topic is lunar exploration. So it's about looking forward, down the road 20, 30, 40 years. We have settlements on the moon. What kind of technologies do we need for that? So a little bit of a skunk works type of thing. And then, if some ideas turn out to be really interesting and worth pursuing further, then we can inject them into the regular, let's say, ESA ecosystem of technology development. And after that, for a couple of years, I worked on Gateway. So I was a little bit. Gateway is this small space station that will fly in orbit around the moon. In this, will be constructed in a few years. Much smaller than space station, but much further out, right? 1,000 times further away than space station in moon orbit. And it's a facility in which Europe, ESA plays a major role because we are responsible for IHAB, this international habitat, which is going to be one of the 2 big habitation modules of the station, but also a module that will provide refueling capability to the engine, to the propulsion system of this space station, enabling it to extend its lifetime in maintaining maneuvering capabilities. It will also, hopefully that's maintained in the requirement space, have big windows that will allow astronauts to look both at the Earth and at the moon, and of course share in a visual way their experience and some stowage capabilities. And ESA will also provide an enhanced communication infrastructure for Gateway. So let's say compared to space station, where we are a significant partner, of course, but let's say not on the critical path of the ISS. For Gateway, and so for this further step toward moon exploration, we are definitely a partner which is critical to the success of this program.
Wow, okay, that's great. So I'm afraid we are running out of time, Samantha. So I think I'll say thank you to you in a moment. But just one last question. It's a great one. Again, came in on Instagram, which is, if you could travel back in time and meet the 10 years old Samantha, what would you tell her in retrospect?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I would be tempted to tell her to take more time to have fun. I think already as a 10-year-old, I was somebody who worked really hard. And sometimes I wish that I had taken more time to, so also enjoy fun and friends as I was growing up. At the same time, although I would be tempted to say that, I would probably just not say anything because, I think it's, I'm very happy about where I am in my life. And I think where you are eventually in your life is a product of everything that you've done before, also your mistakes, also things that, maybe were not really balanced. But in the end, they brought me where I am now, and I'm very happy with my life, with my work, with my family, and so probably I wouldn't touch anything.
That's a great answer. So thank you. So thank you very much, Samantha, for your time. For those watching online, you have until 18th of June to put your application in the astronaut selection. And meanwhile, good luck with all the rest of your training, Samantha. And we're looking forward to your mission. Fantastic.
Thank you
Great
so
to
much,
talk to you.
Dave.
Bye
Same
now.
here. Thank you.